What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about volume training made popular by Arnold Schwarzenegger and high intensity training made popular by Mike Mentzer. There's a lot of controversy around these two styles of training. So what we're going to do, we're going to kind of dig into those two guys' philosophies about their training, get a little bit more into the philosophy behind it all together, and then I will kind of give you my opinion, my 2 cents, and how to use both of these programs for the right reasons and at the right times to accomplish your goals. So Arnold was very popular for high volume training. He was training 6 days a week, twice a day sometimes, lots of sets, lots of reps. And that form of training was very popular in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, early 2000s, things like that, because of Arnold being who he is.
This, you know what I mean? Right. Okay.
So Arnold's philosophy was basically to outwork everybody else. And there's a lot of other guys that have gone down that same road. Jay Cutler was famous for high volume training when he was chasing Ronnie Coleman, trying to beat him. Even Ronnie Coleman used a lot of high volume training. He did also do a lot of high intensity, like powerlifting style training, so he's a little bit different. That's why I didn't lump him into that group. But there's a lot of people that's their plan is just to simply outwork everybody, which isn't necessarily a bad idea. But what happens is a lot of times people aren't recovering properly, and then that's where that program, where it can be good, can run into some hiccups. Now, Mike Mentzer, on the other hand, that popularized high intensity training, which was like one set to complete failure for a muscle. He was training 30 minutes, 4 days a week. Mike Mentzer's training, that philosophy is kind of reemerged recently. It becomes super popular on the internet, things like that. And there's a few reasons to that, and we're going to get more into that when I talk about like the deeper philosophies behind the training. But what I want to talk about first, contrasting these two guys and their philosophies, is to kind of understand where they're coming from, right? Particularly Mike Mentzer. We already kind of talked about Arnold and how, you know, his goal was just to outwork everybody else. Mike Mentzer was a lot more science-based, and when we get into that, like I said, we'll get into the science behind it a little bit more. So where he started very good and very science-based, his philosophy kind of deviated a little bit, and that's what I want to talk about, because what happened was Arnold and Mike Mentzer were big-time rivals back in the 70s for the Olympia.
Contests are fixed. The only people who saw Arnold as the winner, 7 judges and his closest friends. None of the other competitors saw him as the winner. None of the audience, or very few, only those that were his friends. There is no way that Arnold Schwarzenegger deserved to win.
Arnold was very, very popular. He was, you know, the kind of Joe Weider's golden child. That's why that era of bodybuilding is referred to as the golden era. Arnold was on the cover of all the magazines, all of that, right? So Arnold was super popular. He was Mr. Olympia, come over from Germany or from Austria. Mike Mentzer being a big rival, and who, in my opinion, of the two had the better physique. You know, I'm just saying. What happened was during that rivalry, when he kept losing to Arnold for arguably the politics in the sport, he started to get kind of bitter about it. And what he did is he started basically trying to create his own kind of cult following around the opposite of what Arnold was preaching, right? So Arnold's talking high volume, Mike Mentzer's more about high intensity, low volume. And then that's when he kind of dug his heels into that. And that's when he got down to saying things like the close grip pull down is the best exercise you should do for your biceps, or dips are the most important exercise for upper body, or things like that. He got into absolutes, which is what I don't really like, is when people get like, there's a lot of science behind training, diet, all of that. But when people start speaking in absolutes, like this is the way, it just doesn't work that way. It's not that black and white. It's not that cut and dry. So getting into the science behind it, the idea with volume training is you're doing high reps, more sets, just more overall volume, right? So the idea is you're more chasing the pump. You know, Arnold, you know, had a famous quote about the pump.
It's as satisfying to me as coming is, you know, as having sex with a woman and coming.
Rich Piano is another one that preached big on the pump. So for bodybuilding, the pump is super important. You're getting that muscle into the blood. You're getting that blood into the muscle, that's how all of your nutrients, your supplements, everything that you put in your body is carried to the muscle via the bloodstream, right? So when you're getting more of a pump, you're feeding the muscle more to grow. Now, with high intensity training, it's more about shocking your body in a way, lack for a better term, but it's about really pushing the boundaries a lot more. So the big thing to understand with these two styles of training, guys, is you're not doing any more work with one or the other, right? If you're doing a lot of volume, you're not doing more work just because you're doing more sets and reps, because what you're putting into it isn't going to be the same as high intensity. Whereas high intensity, just because you're pushing more weight potentially, or you're just going harder, you're not necessarily doing more than the volume guy because you're not doing as much. So that's the thing, is you're taking the same amount of work and you're just dispersing it differently, right? You're taking this amount of work, spreading it out over a lot of sets, right? Or you're taking a lot more intense work and really putting it into just a few sets. But at the end of the day, you're still doing the same amount of work. There's several factors that go into that. Where you're at in your lifting career, if you're a beginner, an intermediate, or advanced, what your overall goal is. Are you trying to build muscle, strength, performance, all of that, right? Now, the big thing with both of these styles of training, guys, is recovery, okay? Recovery is one of the most overlooked things that there is, one of the most overlooked aspects of bodybuilding that there is. You grow during recovery, okay? You don't get bigger in the gym. You don't get bigger while you're training. You don't get stronger while you're training. None of that, right? All of your growth and progress happens outside the gym when you're recovering. That's my thing with the 6 days a week that Arnold was doing. And I did that for a long time. In the beginning of my career, that's what I followed Arnold from when I was a teenager. I read his biography. I read the Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding that he did, all of that, right? So a lot of my early years were based on Arnold, which when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, my body could handle that a little bit more. But I still believe, had I changed some things up, knowing what I know now, I probably still would have progressed more now. So with that high volume training, if you're not taking enough rest days, you're not getting enough time to recover. Same thing with the high intensity. If you're doing super high intense lifts, reps, sets, sessions like that, but you're trying to do that with the volume, you're just gonna beat yourself up. You're not gonna get anywhere, right?
Well, as I write in my book, stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself. Why are you still hitting yourself?
My opinion on how to use both of these styles of training to get your best advantage is, I would say volume training is better suited for people that are, I don't want to say beginners, because it's not a beginner program by any means. But if you're newer to lifting, let's put it that way. If you're newer to lifting, or like an intermediate, that's where things are going to start to change. Volume's probably going to be the better way to go. And here's why. Lifting is a skill, just like anything else, right? And you get better at anything through practice, through repetition. So when you're doing more sets, more volume, more like that, right? You're really practicing your lifting, right? You're practicing your form, you're practicing your technique, you're practicing your tempo, all of that, your control of the weights. There's a lot of things that go into that. So you're not putting as much, I don't want to say you're not putting as much effort into it, because that sounds like you're not working hard, and I don't mean that at all. I mean, think of it like a marathon versus a sprint. A marathon is still a lot of work. It's not easy. You're going to run slower and you're going to pace yourself because you have more to go. A sprint, you're going a lot harder, but you're going a shorter duration. So that's kind of the same thing here, right? That volume, you're not doing less work, but it's more paced, so to speak. So you're really going to get more opportunity to perfect your technique. The other reason why I believe that volume is good in the beginning is, when you're first starting out, you don't really know what your body's truly capable of, right? So your workload capacity and your threshold is gonna just naturally be lower. So the more you train, the harder you're gonna be able to train, the more work you're gonna be able to do, You're going to start to learn what your limitations are, all of that stuff, right? So in the beginning, that volume is going to really help you to learn your body, learn the exercises, all of that, and it's going to really get you a lot of good results. Now, what happens to me, what happens to a lot of people is as we become more advanced and as we're able to push ourselves more, I started getting more into like the way that I train, right? Not the programming, but like the actual effort I put into my sets was getting more intense, but I was still following like a volume program, and I was just getting basically the shit beat out of me.
I can do this all day.
Like I wasn't recovering. I didn't necessarily think that at first because I was still able to do the work. I was still able to train hard, and I felt like my lifts were going good, my gym sessions were going good, but I was just like dead outside the gym. My appetite was low. I wasn't sleeping well. I was tired, even though I was tired all the time. Aches and pains, sore all the time, all this kind of shit, right? And so I wanted to tell myself that, I'm not overtraining because I can do it, right? But my body is something different. That's when I kind of learned as I progressed, as I advanced, and as a lot of other people advanced, you're gonna have to sometimes change over to that more intense style of training, which means backing off the volume, which again, like I was saying earlier, this is where a lot of people get fucked in the head, right? Is because if you've been training hard for a number of years and doing that volume and you really pride yourself on someone who does a lot of work, and then you switch over to an intensity program, which is doing what seems to you like less work because you're doing less sets, less exercises, less time in the gym, everything feels like less, but you're actually doing more. So for me, I dropped from a 6-day-a-week program to a 5-day-a-week program, started doing better, started feeling better, getting better results. I eventually dropped down to a 4-day-a-week program. So I was doing Monday, Tuesday, rest day, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, rest the weekend. That was better. And then what I started doing more recently is I've switched to an every other day training split. So I never train 2 days in a row anymore. It's every other day. Now, when you think about that, what really made me switch over to that is every other day is still 4 days a week, right? So I do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, right? So 4 out of 7 days. Rest Monday, then I'll do Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Monday again, right? So you're doing that every other day split. You're still training 4 days a week, but you're having a rest day after every training session. For me, what that's done is, one, it's given me a lot more, I don't want to say motivation, but a lot more drive into every workout that I do, right? Because one, I'm rested, so I'm going into it fresh, and I know that I'm not working out the next day. So that really allows me to put all of my effort and not conserve anything, right? Because if I'm training like with my split that I do, chest and back on day 1, and then shoulders would be day 2. So if I'm training chest and back, but I know I got shoulders the next day, it's kind of holding me back a little bit. Or better example would even be my 3rd day would be legs, and then 4th day would be arms. So when I have a hard leg day, and I know I have arms the next day, I don't want to blow my body out completely because I want to be able to train hard the next day, particularly when I was already tired and struggling, right? So by breaking it up that way, my training frequency is the same. I'm still doing the same amount of work, but I have it split up differently to where I'm getting recovery before the workout, I'm getting recovery after the workout, so that one workout is isolated between 2 days of recovery, so I'm able to train harder and recover better, and that's been a huge game changer. Now, the other thing I want to get into about this, particularly about the high intensity thing, right? One of the biggest misconceptions is that high intensity or more intense means heavier, and that's not, those two words are not the same. It's about how hard you push yourself. It's about how close you take yourself to failure and what failure actually means. Mike Menser, he was big on, I think he preached like 6 to 9 reps. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't remember what it was off the top of my head, but he was in like the sub 10 rep range, which is intense and that is heavy. The one thing that I want to say about that, where I kind of fall between the two, you got to understand your nervous system. So that's a big factor that most lifters don't consider, okay? So your central nervous system, your brain, spine, all that is what controls everything in your body, right? How you breathe, how your brain function, how your muscles move, all of that. You can't really make your nervous system stronger per se. Like, you can train your nervous system to react differently, but it's not the same thing as a muscle that can like literally grow in size and strength, right? So as human beings, our central nervous system can only handle so much. It can handle a lot, but it can't handle a lot over a long period of time. So that's the big thing to understand what that is. If you're going to absolute failure every single time, that's going to be a lot more taxing on the nervous system, which means you're going to need more recovery. What I do to kind of combat that is one, that every other day split. So that's giving me a lot more recovery. The other thing that I do personally is I do a deload week every 4th week, right? So I'll have 3 weeks of very hard training, followed by 1 week that's kind of not light, but about half what I would normally do. And I'm doing about the same number of reps. So I don't do more reps. It's, lack for a better word, going through the motions, getting some blood in the muscle, but not really stressing the nervous system, and just allowing to recover. Other people, like when I do their programs, I'll put a deload week, maybe every 5th or 6th week. It kind of depends on the individual. For me, I've found that after 3 hard weeks of training, that's when I start to feel myself kind of like dragging myself into the gym, right? The week 1, I'm like gung-ho. Week 2, I'm feeling really good because I had a good week last week, and then this week's going really good. That 3rd week is still good, but that's when I start to kind of feel a little bit fatigued. And then if I try to do a 4th week hard, like I can still train hard, like I can still push myself to do it, but then it becomes just kind of like, I'm really dragging myself through the workout. So I'm not really getting out of it what I could. So that's, for me, I found that's where that works really well, is doing that deload every 4th week. Other people can push it out a little bit farther. It really depends. Now, if there's anything that you guys can wrap your heads around, it's that you got to prioritize your recovery. Recovery is when, like I said, it's when you grow. Understanding that time off is actually progress. When you can like click that in your mind, everything will change for you guys. Another good point I should mention too, actually, is the different muscles, different size muscles, right? Chest, back, legs, things like that, bigger muscle groups are going to respond to not necessarily lower rep, but a bit heavier and a little bit more intense pushes, right? Where, like for me, bench press, I come down slow and then explode up. It's a little bit slower and I'm moving some weight. Whereas if I'm doing curls, it's going to be more of that pumping movement, right? A little bit faster, so to speak, a little bit higher rep than like the chest or the back or something like that. So that's where in my programs, some exercises are going to be a little bit lower rep, some are going to be a little bit higher rep. We're also going to progress month over month in reps, so different things. There's a lot of aspects that go into making a really good training program that's going to get you the best results. You can do things like 3 sets of 10 or 5 sets of 5, stuff like that. Like, that's good. That'll get you some progress, but you got to understand, when you make things like that simple like that, it's really so you don't have to fucking think about shit. If you just go to the gym and do 3 sets of 10 on every exercise, you don't really have to know anything or remember anything. You just do the same shit for everything. But if you think that your chest and legs work the same way as your arms and shoulders, like, you got to be kidding yourself. They're not the same, so we can't train them exactly the same. So rep wise, I still like to be, for building muscle, in that 10 to 15 rep range, right? So a lot of the programs that I do, like the first month will be 10 reps, we'll progress to 12, the second month we'll progress to 15, the third month so on and so forth like that. Go back, repeat. So that way we're like, it's still high intensity training, like the amount of effort that I'm putting into the sets, how close I'm training to failure, the recovery that I'm getting, but I'm still doing like volume, like a volume rep range, if that makes sense, right? Because I still do very much believe in the pump and feeding the muscles and so on and so forth. That's another thing that I should have mentioned earlier when we're talking about transitioning from volume to intensity is, when you get in the gym, you do your first, like your warm up set, and you start to feel some blood moving. You do your first working set, and you start to feel that pump, and then usually after like 2 to 5 sets in, your pump is just like you're feeling fucking huge. You feel unbelievable. You want to leave the gym feeling that way. And what I used to do was I would get there, I would keep training, and I would start to lose my pump. Now, if you're losing your pump, that is your sign you got to get the fuck out. Okay. There's nothing I can tell you that's more clear than that. Is if your pump starts decreasing, that's your body telling you that you're done. Doesn't matter where you're at in your program, whatever, like your body's had enough at that point, and anything that you're doing after that is the opposite of progress. Okay. Like the best way I've heard it explained was like buying and selling stock, right? You want to buy low, right, when you're rested, recovered, right? That's where I talk about having that every other day split. So you're always training fresh after a rest day. So you're going to buy in low, you're going to build that pump up high, and then you're going to sell, right, when you're high before you start to go back down, right? So same thing, if you buy in low and investing, that stock gains value, but then it starts to go back down. If you sell here, you missed all of this, right? So it's the same thing with the pump. If you get to that pump and you start to lose it, you're going to start losing progress, and we don't want that. Now, last thing I want to talk about is failure, about training close to failure. Again, talking about that nervous system, if you're failing, when you fail, that means that your muscle is telling your nervous system, like, dude, I can't. You know what I'm saying? Your nervous system's saying lift, and your muscle's like, no, man, we're out. That's all we got. When that happens, that's extremely taxing on the nervous system. That's why even though high intensity training is about training to failure, I don't like to train to absolute failure very often. So what I typically do is I use what's called an RPE scale, which stands for rate of perceived exertion. So an RPE 10 is like a max out, right? You can't do anything else. An RPE 9 is 1 away from 10, so that would mean you have 1 rep left in the tank. An RPE 8 would mean you have 2 reps left in the tank, so on and so forth, right? So I generally train around an RPE 9, sometimes 8 if I'm like tired or I got like an achy shoulder, or like if I'm just feeling a little bit not 100% that day, then I'll take my training down one notch, 1 rep, so to speak, to that RPE 8, just to be a little bit safe. But most of the time I'm going to be training at RPE 9. So I'm going to almost failure, but not absolute failure. And the reason why is because when I'm not maxing out that stress on my nervous system, that's what's going to allow me to really push myself more for longer periods of time. Now, granted, like I said, I'm still doing that 3 weeks intense, 1 deload week. But if I was training to absolute failure, even that would be too much. So for me, it's been kind of finding that balance of where I need to, how much I need to drop my sets, where my reps need to be, how close to failure, what my recovery needs to be. It's all these things kind of coming together to get you to be able to train as hard as you can every single time that you're in the gym. And in order to do that, you have to take some lighter, less intense weeks in order to recover. So I hope that kind of made some sense, guys. I hope it kind of cleared up the difference between volume and intensity, and that one's not, I wouldn't say is better than the other. They're just different. They're going to approach things in different ways. And some are going to work better for different people. Some people, they're just not going to be able to put as much into each set for whatever reason. Volume may be better for them. Some people that just really, really like training hard, really like pushing themselves, volume is not going to be good for you because you're going to be way overdoing it. So that's where intensity is going to be better for you. I hope that makes sense. If you guys need help with your programming, download my app. I have an intensity bodybuilding program and a volume bodybuilding program on my app. That way you can kind of try one or the other. You can message me on the app and we can kind of talk about where your skill level is at, where your experience level is at, what your goals are, and I can kind of help you figure out which program is going to be best for you. So if you want to download my app, just go to the link in my bio or search Lifts with Wolves in the App Store or the Google Play Store, and then message me on there and I'll help you choose a program.